So let's talk about graphs. Whenever we're talking about graphs, we are talking about a y-axis and an x-axis. So the horizontal line here that runs side to side is going to be my x-axis, and it goes from negative infinity to positive infinity, and we always read left to right. Whenever we talk about this vertical line, we're talking about our y-axis, and whenever we read it, we always read bottom to top. And it's because we always go for the smaller number to the larger, same smaller number to larger, so it's important. So whenever we're talking about a straight line, we determine its slope. And a formula to determine a slope is little m is equal to the change in y divided by the change in x. And usually we have two order pairs, right, in order to determine this. And that's all you have to have is two order pairs to graph a line. Whenever we're reading the line, if the line rises left to right, it's a positive slope. Makes sense, right? We're going from the negative values up to the positive. If the line falls left to right, it's a negative slope. Makes sense. We're going from positive values down to negatives. If the line is horizontal, the slope is 0. Think about a horizon. When the day starts, the sun rises, it starts from 0. If the line is vertical, the slope is undefined. Well, it makes sense because you can't hang a picture on the wall without some kind of support. When we start talking about the intercepts, we're talking about the x-intercepts. When we cross this vertical line here, this x-intercept line, y is always 0. So whenever we look for our x-intercept, just plug in 0 for y. And you get some number for x. Whenever we're looking for the y-intercept, we're looking for where it crosses the y-axis. That means anywhere on the y-axis, x is always 0. So if you're looking for y-intercept, plug in 0 for x. Let's talk just real quickly about the Cartesian coordinates, the graph. This is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. And what do I know about it? In quadrant 1, my x values are positive and my y values are positive. Remember, order pair is always x comma y. It's because y depends on x. And then quadrant 2, we have a negative value for x, positive for y. In quadrant 3, they're both negatives. And in quadrant 4, we have a positive x and a negative y. So it's important that you understand this. I'm going to use this one equation here to solve for different ways of graphing this. So solving this line, I'm going to solve this one here. I got a table set up to help you out. You don't have to set it up this way. You can use the XY table in a different format. However you want to do it. Everybody likes to solve their problems different. Whichever makes sense to you. Whenever I'm looking at this line, though, I'm thinking, well, I want to use the intercepts because it makes it easier, right? Because if I plug in 0 for y, what happens? X minus 2 times 0 equals 1. Well, 2 times 0 is just 0. So my x becomes 1. My notation there. So that order pair is 1 comma 0. So let's go plot it. Let's start at the origin. The origin is 0, 0. So that's where x is 0, y is 0. And x is positive 1, so I'm going to go to the right one. And y is 0, so I'm going to stay on the x-intercept, x-axis. That's where this line is crossing the x-axis. So let's plug in 0 for x. Well, I get 0 minus 2y is equal to 1. Well, I'm going to end up with a fraction, right? Because 0 gives me negative 2y equals 1. Divide by the negative 2. And I get negative half for my y value. So I'm going to go to the origin, 0, 0. X is 0, so I'm going to stay on the y-axis. And the y is negative half, so I'm going to go about right there. Guys, just be careful because some of the questions will ask you to literally solve for the x-intercepts. That's when we're definitely going to use this method. But if it just says solve for this line, graph it, and it doesn't tell you how, then you could use these points or you can use other points. I always stay small, but most of the graphs that we work with are 10 by 10, so you definitely want to stay small. And what I mean by small, I mean -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. I try to stay small. Sometimes, though, we end up with fractions, and it's not always as pretty. I do want to plot one more point just because I want to show you a difference. Whenever we're plotting a straight line, we only need 2 order pairs, but I do definitely want to do one more. So what if I said x is -1? So I got -1 minus 2y is equal to 1. So we're going to solve for that y. That means we need to get this constant term over here. So now I got -2y is equal to 2, and I'm going to solve for y, so I have to divide by the -2. -2 goes into +2, leaves me with a -1, so this order pair is -1, -1. So I'm going to go back to the origin, 0, 0. I'm going to go to where x is negative, which is to the left, 1, and then y is negative, so I'm going to go down the number of negatives, which is 1. And we have a line. We're going to draw it, connect the dots, put arrows on the end, because this line is going to continuously go out to. Okay, so let's graph this line here. So I'm going to plug in 0 for x, and what does that give me? 0 for y. If I plug in 1 for x, I get 2 for y. And the reason why I did that is because y has a +1 and it's set equal to that x value. So we know whatever we plug in for x, we're going to get an outcome. So I get 0, 0, and 1, 2 is my order pair. So if I was to graph this on a graph, let's just use this one right here again. I go 0, 0 right here, and I got a positive, well, that's not going to be a very good one. Let's use this one up here. 0, 0, and then a +1 for x, +2 for y, and this is what I get. This next example is wanting you to solve for the x and y intercept, but I kind of want to do something a little different right here. I want to talk about the slope and y-intercept. That is, y is equal to mx plus b, where m is my slope, b is my y-intercept. So let's take this equation here, x minus 5y is equal to 5, and let's solve for it in the slope-intercept format. That means I got to get it all set equal to y. So that means this x needs to be subtracted because it's positive on that side. So I got -5y is equal to -x plus 5. And now I need a +1 coefficient on y, and in this case here we have a -5, so let's divide it by -5, but what I divide I have to do all parts by. So now I have y is equal to, negative divides negative is positive, 1/5, x negative and positive gives me a -1. So my slope here is 1/5. My y-intercept is -1. The order pair would be 0, -1. Remember, when you cross the y-axis, x will be 0. So when we're going to plot this, guys, I'm going to give you a rule plotting using your slope and your y-intercept. So here's a note. And there's 2 ways to plot your slope, but I'm going to teach y'all the easiest and most straightforward way. So when we plot our slope, if the slope is positive, right? If it's a positive number, go up number of y values, and to the right number of x values. And just a quick reminder, our slope is equal to y over x. Remember, at the beginning I said that it's a change in y divided by a change in x, and we'll do an example here in a little bit solving for the slope. If the slope is negative number, go down the number of y's and go to the right number of x. Okay? If slope, let me scoot this up a little bit, is 0, it's a horizontal line, right? I mean, it's just going to give us some points on y. X will be whatever, and y will be changing. If it's a vertical line, x is not changing, but y is. Okay, that's just a quick reminder. Okay, so let's come back. Let's graph this. So what we're going to do first, we're going to graph the y-intercept. It's 0, negative 1. So I'm going to go 0, 0, go down 1. So x is 0 there, and y is negative 1 there. From there, I'm going to plot my slope. So it is a positive slope, right? 1/5, and it's positive. My y value is 1, so I'm going to go up 1 and to the right 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could do it again if you want to get a longer line. 1, up 1, to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we got us our line. This one's going to be kind of hard to draw straight for me. I should have used a ruler. And I'm going to put arrows on the end, and then I got my line. Solve for the slope using two order pairs. So we have this order pair -1, 2 and 4, -2. So let's call this x1, y1, x2, y2. So we know solving for a slope is little m. We have our change in y divided by a change in x. And what is my change in y? It's y2, which is -2, minus my change in y1 divided by my change in x2 minus my change in y1. Be careful, guys, because the formula literally says minus. So if you have a negative value, be sure and put that negative value in parentheses, because negative times negative gives me a positive. So you got to be careful. Your answer won't be right if you're not. So now I have -2 minus 2 gives me a -4. And then I have -4 minus a -1, which gives me 4 plus 1, right? So -4 divided by 4 plus 1 is 5. So my slope here is -4/5. So that means I would go down 4 on y values. And I would go to the right 5 on x values when graphing that. And all you need is one of these order pairs. So I can graph this using one of the order pairs and the slope. And then we would have it. Of course, you can graph using those too, but it wouldn't tell you the slope unless you actually counted it out. So there is a shortcut there, guys. Finishing this section up, let's say we're wanting to solve for this this here into the slope-intercept form. One way to do it is use the point-slope formula. It's going to be y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So previous example we solved for the slope and we got -4/5. So we just need one of the order pairs and we just need that slope. So let's take it. Let's say y minus, and let me get this written and change the color. Alright, I'm going to pick this order pair. Doesn't matter, you can pick either one. It's on the same line. My y value is 2. My slope is -4/5. My x value is -1. So it's important. See, negative. So now we have y minus 2 is equal to, let's distribute this -4/5 to the positive x. We need to clean this up, right, before we distribute. This becomes a positive 1, correct? So we'll have negative times positive gives me negative. 4/5 times 1 is 4/5. We're almost done. We need to make this negative 2 go to 0 on this side and show up on this other side. So I'm going to add it. And now I have y is equal to negative 4/5 x. I have negative 4/5 plus 2. Guys, those of you that don't like fractions, I'm going to go ahead and put that 2 over 1. This here, in order to add these two together, I have to have the least common denominator. I have a 5 and I have a 1. My least common denominator here is going to be 5 because 1 will go into 5 and 5 will go into 1. So, I'm just going to rewrite one more time. And since this already has my 5 in the denominator, I don't have to change it. But this one here, I do need to multiply 5 over 5 to it. So now I have y equals negative 4/5 x minus 4/5 plus 2 times 5 is 10, 1 times 5 is 5, and now we can put these two together by using addition and subtraction. So I have negative 4 plus 10 is 6. 5 plus, or of course the denominator does not change, guys. It stays at 10. I mean 5. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Negative 4/5 x minus 6/5. This is my slope intercept form. This is my line. I can graph it by plotting 0, negative 6/5, and then this is my y-intercept, and this is my slope.